Hello and welcome to the BI WizKid YouTube channel. In this video we're going to show you some finance reporting. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take some data, some actuals and some targets. We're going to load those into Power BI and we're going to show you how to visualize those in the best possible way. Along with that, we're going to show you some tips and tricks with M-Code where we can take monthly targets and split those down equally into daily values using powerquery. Now this is a fun and fast video. It really goes into some really granular detail of how to get the best out of financial reporting, and it's presented by one of our guests, Lewis Holmes. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and please like, share and comment on the video. So without further ado, here we have Lewis Holmes showing us financial reporting within Power BI. Hashtag bowl.
So today I'm going to talk you through a simple example of how to load some revenue data into your reports, load some target data, and then to kind of rephase that so they're in alignment, chart it up, and hopefully generate some nice dashboards that show you how you're comparing sort of against your target data. I'm going to assume you have some working knowledge of Power Query, Power BI, DAX, but there isn't anything too complicated within this. So I've already got a Power BI open. I've already imported a calendar table into this. Get out of the way. Yes, so I have my calendar table in already. So I'm just going to go ahead and load some sales data in. So I have a local SQL Server instance. So I'm just going to connect into that and pull up my sales data and load that into Power BI. We're going to use import mode for this. So now I have my sales table. If we jump onto the data view, you'll see that the sales table contains a few columns. You've got the sale ID, a product ID, the date, platform, and revenue. So in this example, we don't really care about the individual sales. We just care about a daily aggregation of the revenue. So this sale ID and product ID isn't really needed. And we've got lots of rows in here, so we can reduce the amount of data we're exposing to the model. So to do that, you just need to jump into Power Query, which on the remodeled interface is under Transform Data. Here we go. I'll just refresh my preview. Okay, so this is the data. So as I said, we're not interested in sale or product, so we can just right-click and remove those. So we've removed a couple of columns, and now if we order this ascending, just so as an example, you'll see there are multiple sales per date, and we don't really need that. We're going to aggregate this up. So I'll remove the sorting because that'll hurt performance. But then if we click on Group By, we can tell it under Advanced to group by sales data and the platform, and we're going to sum up the revenue. Okay, so now we will have one row per date per instance of the platform. There are only two platforms this company has, this imaginary company. They have a channel for the website and a channel for the app. So now we have a total of the revenue, we have a sales date. I'm just going to rename the columns so they're a bit more consistent. So we've got date, platform, revenue. One important thing to check if you're coming from SQL Server is to always check the native query. So this is the query runs against SQL Server to load the data. If it's a SQL Server source, you can always right-click and do View Native Query, and it shows you the code it's running against the database. In my opinion, it's always preferable to have the database do as much work as possible. So there are some operations, and I've gone out of that already. There are some operations that can't be pushed down to the database level. So if I just jump back in there, but fortunately in this instance, it can do all that, and you can see the query at each step. So if at any point this option is grayed out, you know you've done an operation that can't be pushed down to the underlying database. In my opinion, it's always better to try and push everything down to the database level, and to do that, I would generally follow a pattern. So I would remove any columns that aren't being used. I'll then apply any filters you want to apply by using the filters on these options. I would then sort out any data types that are incorrect, and then apply grouping, and then finally any calculated columns. It tends to be more complicated calculations that break the native query. So if you do that towards the end, you've got all the benefits beforehand of the grouping and the filtering and all the other operations. So there isn't too much to be said there, so I'll load that data into the model. So now we have a sales table. I'm just going to create a quick measure that gives us the revenue. So that's just going to be the sum of the revenue. And obviously I can't do that, so I'm going to call it revenue total. And I just need to check my relationship between the sales and the calendar table. So it's not automatically detected it, so I'll just drag that across. Jumping back onto the report view, I can now bring in the date from the calendar and then the revenue total. And we'll make this a chart. So now we can see the daily revenue, which is quite sporadic. I use a random number generator to get the sales, so that's kind of as I would expect. To get a year-to-date figure, there's a built-in function. So if you create a new measure, do revenue cumulative, and it's total year-to-date. And we're going to give it the measure I've already created, revenue total, and you just have to give it the date from the date table. There are some extra functions on there if you're not working on calendar years. So now we can bring this one into the chart, take away that, and now we've got pretty much a straight line showing the revenue year to date. It's gone flat here because obviously we don't have any sales into the future, and I'll show you how to get rid of that in a moment. The other side to this is the target data. So quite often, in my experience, there's a colleague in finance who provides you with an Excel file or looks something like this, where they've got by month how much revenue they want to generate per platform, which is fine. Quite often they're not targeted down to individual days. These targets in particular seem to have a little bit of a bump over the summer months and then kind of calm down over the winter. That could be just the seasonality of the business. Again, that's all fine. So you can load that directly from Excel, but I've got it in the database as well to show you some more, to show you the impact on the query folding as well. So if I load that in, oh no, that's, jump back onto this one. So if I load that target data in, again, we're on import mode. So now we have targets, month, platform, target. I'm just going to create a new measure again for target total. And again, I'm just going to create a year-to-date version of that as well. Year-to-date. So because we have two tables here, one for sales, one for targets, we just need to make sure that the relationship's defined. You can see we've got a flat line like that. That is a strong indication the target, there's no relationship. So we'll jump back on here, and it's called month in this extract, and we'll join it back onto date. So now we can see the actual value against the target value. Obviously the target's monthly, so we're seeing kind of steps. So on the first of every month, the target jumps up. This isn't great for in-month reporting, so I'm just going to show you quickly how to change this so that you'll have a sort of a straight line representing the target. So I'm going to do that in powerquery. So here's my target data. At the moment, these targets are monthly. So to get a daily version of this, we need to know, well, first of all, we need to know how many days are in the month. So there are built-in functions in powerquery. So if you click on the month, add column, and under the date option here, there are loads of really fancy functions that allow you to get extra columns. One of them is the days in the month. So I'll do that, and then so now I know obviously in January there's 31, February this year there were 29. We're just going to create a new column, which is the daily target. And dead simple, we're just going to do what is the monthly target divided by the days in the month. So this now represents the target for each day within the month. What we need to do now is to change the grain of this table though, so we have a 1 row per day. So far everything we've done is use the interface within powerquery, but you can go into the advanced editor and it shows you the M code that represents. There are much more features within powerquery than what is represented here, or in the interface rather. So I'm going to add a line in, and this is adding an extra column in using the custom function list.dates. So there is the documentation out there for powerquery, and if you go to Microsoft's website, it says list.dates, and this says here it returns a list of dates of the size count, the second parameter, starting at the start, and it has a step. Come on, just minimize that then. So in my example here, I've taken the start of the month and I'm having it create an item for every day in the month, and the duration. This is a duration data type which represents a daily increment. Just need to tell it to use this column, and so now we have an extra column here which is a list which shows us every single day in the month. If you click on it, you can see here all different options. It's showing the top 20. So what you can do quite easily is click on this button, click on expand to new rows, and now the data grain has changed from one that is monthly to one that is daily. So now we don't need a load of these other columns. So we can get rid of the month, we can get rid of the monthly target, and get rid of the days in the month. We can reorganize these. So this is now the date. Instead of the daily target, this is just now the actual target. And we can sort out the data types. Cool, so now this table we're loading into Power BI is much bigger, but it should allow better reporting. So if we load it in, and again you can see it's gone like this. I imagine the relationship's broken because I've changed the column name, which is indeed what's happened. So we'll join date onto date. Oh, many to many. That's because it's the wrong table. Dates onto date. So now when we jump back into the report, we have our nice year-to-date target line against the actual. Then, as I mentioned, there is another property on these tables to do with the platform. So we've got a website channel and we have an app channel. At the moment, we can't slice by that because there isn't a common table to filter that. So I'm just going to show you quickly how to create that. We can do that by jumping back into powerquery. And I'm just going to reload those two tables. The aim here is to get the distinct values of both of the platform from both the tables. It's important to bring both in because potentially they could be different. So in this instance, I'm going to just click on platform and group it by the platform. Because we're grouping, it has to have some sort of aggregation. So we're just going to tell it to count the rows. And then we can hide this column. So this is the unique list of platforms in the sales table. Another way to achieve that would be to just remove the extra columns and then tell it to remove duplicates. So both of these have the unique list of platforms, but you achieve it in different ways. And if you view the query that's running against the server, you'll see this one's doing a select distinct, whereas the sales one will be actually applying the grouping. I think when it hits SQL Server's sort of query analyzer, these will amount to the same thing. But it's important to remember that the steps you go through to achieve a result can have an impact on the underlying database. So the final thing we need to do is just stick these two tables together. And there's an option for append queries. So we're just going to append it as new, and that will add the two tables together. So we want the target and the sales. Because it's added them together, it doesn't do a distinct sort of union, as we call it in SQL. It just adds two tables together, so we do need to apply the remove duplicates on this as well. So now we have our platform table, and we can call it as that. These ones that we use to generate the unique lists can be hidden, so you can turn off include in report refresh, and you can turn off enable load. So these won't be exposed to the underlying data. These won't be exposed into Power BI, so you'll have a nice clean data model. So if I load that platform table in now, I would imagine the relationships have been auto-detected. They have. So because the column names are the same, it's realised that the platform is related to both the sales and the target table. So inside Power BI, we can drag that in as a slicer, and then we can switch between the website and the app. So now it's easy to see that the website is underperforming against the target, and the app is overperforming against the target. I'm just going to remove this flat line here. So on target cumulative, you can just add a quick filter on, so you can say if the max of the date that we're referring to is smaller than today, then we will show the results. Otherwise, we're not going to show anything. But I did it on the target then, apologies. So I'll just cut that out. And I'll go and do it on the revenue one. And there we go. It's just truncated the line, so it's not showing any values that are in the future. So that in a nutshell is how to get your data from both revenue and target data and to compare it against each other. When you have it in this state, there are then many options you can sort of go forward and enhance your reporting. So I'm just going to jump to one I made earlier. One thing you can now do is add a trend line. Now, whilst it is possible to use the trend feature within the chart object, you can go on the trend line here. If you were to add a trend line, you don't get to see the values, it just plots it on the table. So if you add in a measure for the trend line, you can then see, and it will forecast where you're going to be at year end. And I've clicked on that, there we go. The formula I used for that was just something I Googled. You can go on, if you Google trendline DAX, this just creates a line of best fit, and you give it the measure that you want it and the calendar date, and it will just plot a line of best fit against that. The good thing about that is then it is responsive against the other slices. So if you click on the app again, you can see that the app is up and it's way ahead of target, and then the website is obviously underperforming. Another feature to this dashboard that I've added in is an option to allow you to choose aggregation. So at the moment this is website revenue versus target year to date, but it could be that you're interested in the daily. So I've created a slicer that allows you to switch between those two on the report. And again, this is responsive. So you can see the actuals for the app are above generally the target and the website's underneath, but then in aggregate, they're kind of in line. To achieve this functionality, the way I usually do it is I have a table that isn't related to anything else, one that I've manually entered, and in this case I've called it aggregation. I entered it in by just clicking on the enter data option, which is here, and this just allows you to type in values, and I typed in daily and year to date, and the measure I show in here interrogates that slicer. So the measure I'm showing on this chart is target. And if you look at the measure there, it's first of all checking if it has one value, which you can enforce by making it a select one option on the slicer. And then if the aggregation is daily, it shows the daily one, otherwise it shows the cumulative. So that means you don't have to have lots of different measures on this chart. And I did something similar for the title here. So I just asked it, what is the status of the aggregation? Is it daily, year to date? And also, what is the status of the platform slicer? And then I just stitched that together to create a title. And again, once you have the revenue and target values in place, you can then start calculating variances. So the year-to-date variance, percentage variance, and then I've also picked up the projection for the year end. So based on that line of best fit, at year end we're going to be £13,000 up, which is 1.7% against target. These are responsive to the slicers, so you can see that the website's going to be much down, but the app is going to be above. That kind of covers everything I was going to mention as part of my talk.